Hi everyone, I'm Laura Gale Locke. The City of Wichita is taking a new approach to fixing its aging streets. We have two guests here with us today. Seated next to me is Alan King. He is our Public Works and Utilities Director. And down at the end is Aaron Henning, who is our Maintenance Engineer. Thanks guys for being here.
Thank you for having us on.
Well, first tell me a little bit about this new pilot project.
The city is currently in its second year of a 3-year pilot project to try out different pavement treatments that will provide a longer life for our pavement, greater asset value, rideability, and hopefully what we'll develop is an approach that provides the greatest amount of value for the amount of money that we spend.
So how did this whole concept come about?
Well, the contract maintenance program represents a significant percentage of our budget for maintaining streets. And so what we want to make sure that we do is we get the best value out of that part of the streets maintenance budget. So we're looking at ways to get a greater value by looking at different approaches, and is as important being able to measure that value.
We've seen the condition of the pavement, the network decline over time. That's becoming a bigger and bigger issue, and we don't want to jump to the conclusion that adding more money or simply adding more money is necessarily the answer. That we want to make sure that we have the best treatments in place so that we can get the most out of what we have and anything additional that we might have in the future.
Talk to me about the treatments you guys have been using the most historically.
The way that the city has been maintaining its streets is typically we go out into the arterials and we grind down a couple of inches of the asphalt and then replace that with 2 inches of new asphalt, a mill and overlay. And that makes for a really good ride, a good street. It's relatively expensive, and we have a greater need than we have dollars to meet that need. So typically we'll run out of budget to make those repairs before we run out of the streets that need to be repaired. What we're looking at instead is a less expensive way to maintain our streets so that we can do more lane miles of street. So rather than do the typical grinding down the pavement and putting new pavement in its place, we're trying some different seals, some different surfaces that we can put over the streets, and sometimes that will mitigate a street that's failing, and sometimes it'll actually protect a new street to keep it from aging. To give you some sort of an idea about the difference in amount of streets that we can maintain, in 2011 we did 72 lane miles of street. That means that for 72 lane miles we did a mill and overlay, replaced the asphalt. And that was the traditional way that we normally do things. In 2012, we bumped that up to 106 lane miles by introducing approximately 20% of our work with new experimental or new pilot treatments. In this year, 2013, we're going to go all the way up to 192 miles with 94% of the work that we do being this new pilot treatments that we're using. In 2014, the third and final year of our pilot program, we'll be doing over 300 miles of street using yet another pilot treatment for us to evaluate. The idea being that in 2015, we will have done enough of these treatments and have been able to evaluate them that we'll be able to put together and propose to council a pavement preservation approach that maximizes the amount of lane miles and quality of those streets for the amount of money that we spend.
I'm sure that's music to the ears of all the taxpayers out there watching this show. But maybe you guys can explain a little bit more about why are you able to accomplish so much more with these seals and what you can do with the grinding of the asphalt and relaying that?
Well, a good example of that is Tyler Road that we recently completed between Central and 13th. That historically would have been done via mill and overlay, which is a very costly treatment, although it does improve the quality of that particular location very well. What we're experimenting with there is what's called a Cape Seal project, and it's a combination of 2 traditional treatments, but what makes it more affordable, I would say, is that you're actually you're keeping the useful life in that surface. In a mill and overlay, you're removing the top 2 inches typically, And along with all the, any failed areas or bad spots, you're also taking away good pavement that's there, still to be used in between. In a seal coat, what you're able to do, typically we'll go in and we'll strategically repair those major failures in advance of the seal coat so that we get those areas corrected. But then the seal coat itself preserves rather than replaces that good pavement that's in between.
And the cost per square yard of a seal coat is significantly less than the cost per square yard of a mill and overlay. And so just the unit cost for a segment of street is going to be a lot less expensive.
And what about the actual man hours? Compare the two different types of treatments. Is it a lot faster to lay down the Cape seal?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Well, what we're talking about is work that the city contracts out as part of our contract maintenance project. Every year we put out one or more contracts with construction companies that does this work. And so what we're paying them is for the total cost, labor, equipment, and materials to do these treatments on the streets that are in the contract.
Mm-hmm. I guess I was just interested, it seems like you guys are able to cover a lot more streets, with this new approach. So I just wondered if it was faster, why you were able to get more streets done, but it's more of a cost than a timing factor.
Yes.
Okay. How many streets do you guys maintain?
Over 5,000 lane miles is what we maintain. There's 1,800, just over 1,800 centerline miles.
Mm-hmm. And if you had to put it in some type of perspective, how are the overall conditions of our roads?
Well, we've noted we're in the midst of revising our process of inspecting and qualifying the condition. What we used to do is rate the condition of roads, and along with this, we're trying to move towards more of a value approach and this return on investment approach, where condition is more secondary, and the overriding factor is how much value is there? How much remaining service life do we have in each particular road?
Aaron raises an important point, and that is that what we're doing new is not just trying different treatments on roads, but looking at how we inspect and evaluate roads. And rather than using some kind of a condition number that may not be as meaningful, what we are instead doing is looking at an inspection process where we look at a road and how much life it has left on it, the useful remaining life. That's a difference. That's something that we're doing new. So the program we're talking about is piloting these different treatments, but also looking at a way to evaluate our streets that ties it to its useful remaining life and therefore the value of the asset.
How do you guys determine how much life it has left?
It's based on the distresses that we find on the road, and then just typically and across the country, how long do we expect a road to last? A lot of it is dependent on the initial design of the road. It's designed to have a certain useful life, and then we know through either our own personal experience or industry experience how much of an extension we can expect to gain by applying these different treatments. On those that we don't have personal experience with, once it's applied, some of these pilots that we've recently applied, we're going to monitor those closely in the coming years so that we can verify that we are getting that extension of life. It may be shorter, it may be greater, but then that way our overall analysis of the network will be constantly changing to mirror the data that's behind it.
I'll make sure I understand this. So at this point, do you guys have a good feeling on how long the Cape Seal will last?
Based on industry experience, we expect it to last around 8 years.
Give me an idea how great the need is, how many roads out there need to be improved, and why this is such an important project to try out.
Well, as Aaron said, we have 5,000 lane miles of road. That's a lot of pavement. And you could say that every one of those lane miles needs some sort of treatment. If it's a new road, we want to make sure that we put a treatment on it that protects the wearing surface of that road and preserves and extends that life. If it's a road that's in the middle part of its life, there are certain treatments that might make sense to prolong its life. And then there are some roads in our system that are towards the end of their life and need to be mitigated from failure, and there are yet treatments that we can apply to make that road travelable and not fail. So we have different strategies depending on where a particular road segment is in its life. And what we're doing as part of our approach is we're looking at the rate at which a road ages or degrades, and using that rate of degradation, we can predict when the next treatment is going to be needed, and put together a plan, a maintenance plan, a long-term, multi-year plan that looks at each segment and what sort of a treatment we would apply in the future to maximize the value and life of that road.
Yeah. One of the advantages in looking at these, beginning to look at these in financial terms rather than condition terms, is the subjectivity of, for instance, the question that you just asked is, how many streets do we have that need to be improved? Well, that depends on who's on that street and how they feel about the road, and that varies across town. The level of disrepair, if for lack of a better term, that somebody is willing to that somebody accepts, or at what condition it no longer becomes acceptable. So it's difficult to say objectively how many roads need to be quote unquote improved, but what we do know is that all of them need to be maintained and preserved.
Does this apply to residential streets and neighborhoods? And
Absolutely.
Okay.
And when we were talking earlier about the traditional way, the way that we have in the past maintain our roads, we gave a high priority to arterial roads, and with the more expensive approach, we would generally not be able to get much past the arterial road repairs and rehabilitations. In the third year of our pilot project, 2014, we're going to be really emphasizing treatment for the residential streets. They haven't been getting treatment for a number of years, and so what we want to do is we want to look at a particular problem that is found throughout our residential streets, thermal cracking. It's that crack that goes all the way across the street, curb to curb, an inch or 2 inches wide. When you run over it, you hear the thumping sound as you run over it. There's quite a few neighborhood streets that have thermal cracks. So our last year of our pilot, we'll be looking at repairing those thermal cracks in neighborhood streets. What's going to be different about this and the repairs we've made from time to time in the past is we're going to be now going out and doing 300 plus lane miles of neighborhood streets, repairing those thermal cracks. And we want to get some sort of a sense, not only how does that repair hold up, but what are the logistical challenges for us making repairs in such a great number of streets in neighborhoods with all the driveways and all the need for maintaining access. So neighborhood streets are going to get the focus in our third and final year of our pilot project.
So people will really be able to see a difference by the time this pilot project is over.
Yeah, we think that the fact that they're neighborhood streets, the fact that we're doing so many lane miles, 300 plus lane miles, and that we're making an improvement that is going to be very easy to notice, that this will be a very visible improvement to our street network.
And I'm sure you probably have people calling you saying, hey, come to my neighborhood first. How does that work, and are people allowed to make requests?
Well, absolutely, and we evaluate those on a case-by-case basis. Now, one of the advantages of this new approach that we're developing is that in the future, when we're able to model this combination of treatments that serves to maximize the returns on our investments, when we're able to model that over time, we'll have a plan that will go much beyond just this first year, or at least a tentative plan, and we'll be able to get people a much better sense of when in the future we do plan to undertake a repair on their particular street.
And so
that's an important point. Our plans up until now have been maybe a year, at the most 2 years planned out into the future, maybe just some repairs in that next year or the year after that. with this new approach, we're going to actually have programmed in place what we expect to do on each individual segment into the future many years. And so as someone calls into the city to find out when does my street get done, we'll be able to look out several years in the future and say, well, presently the plan is to apply this particular treatment on your street in this particular year. So that'll be an advantage that we have in responding to customers' questions.
And if people do have questions, who can they call?
They can call me at 268-4013. That's the number for the maintenance division.
Okay. And just to make sure we all understand, so this is more than just cracks in the streets. This covers big potholes and everything?
Well, it does. I mean, the potholes, and that's one of the major things that our in-house staff responds to. And that's a symptom of the problem, I guess, is what you might say. You asked about what's the condition of the network, and that's a good measure for that, are the potholes, and that's because the system, at least as we've tracked it over the years, seems to be in a state of decline, and that's the trend that we want to change. As that trend changes, and we're able to better preserve more streets, we'll be able to, over time, we'll experience less and less potholes.
What are some of the factors that lead to the cracks and the potholes?
Well, weather has a lot to do with it. The heating and cooling of streets, the thermal cracks, the cracks that go all the way across the street that we'll be repairing, has a lot to do with expansion and contraction of pavement in hot and cold temperatures. Potholes, likewise. The potholes and the spot repairs and some concrete repairs of like curbs and that, those sometimes are done by our own staff. When we're talking about the repairs that these new seals and some of these, the 300 plus miles, we're talking about contract maintenance, work that's done by a contractor. We have a contract maintenance project that we do every year. It could be one or more contracts that we bid out. We're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 million in a year. And this is a significant part of our road maintenance program. And then we have our own crews respond to pothole repairs and short turnaround. You call a pothole concern in, and in a short period of time, 24 hours or less, our crews go out and actually make repairs to those potholes. So that's the difference between what kind of repairs we do with our own staff and the kind of work that we're talking about here with the contract maintenance.
And talk a little bit about the different costs associated with these different types of treatments in the pilot project.
Well, there are some preservation treatments that can be as little as $1 per square yard. Then there are other seal coats, for example, that can be about $3 per square yard. The old way that we used to do roads, which is the mill and overlay, it was more on the order of about 4 times that, about $12 per square yard. And if a road goes completely to failure and we haven't mitigated it, then what we need to do is reconstruct that road, and now you're talking something on the order of $35 per square yard. So by getting preservation treatment on a road that's new and keeping it new, you're looking at something like $1 per square yard. To take a road that has done some aging and to get it back to an acceptable condition, it can be about $3 a square yard. And if you let a road go completely, now you're talking like $35 a square yard. So the cost difference is very great, and that's why it's so important to get the right treatment on a road at the right time.
Better to pay a little now than a lot later.
Yeah.
It's a lot. The example that we use when people are asking about this is it's a little bit like painting your house. It isn't real expensive to put coats of paint and to keep the paint good on the side of your house. But if you don't paint your house and you let it go, eventually you're talking about replacing the siding on your house. And so putting some money up front in preventive maintenance in the long term is much less expensive than letting it go and doing repairs, corrective maintenance.
That's a good point. So talk to me then, wrap it up for me, with the end of the pilot project. When that happens, that'll be at the end of 2014?
Yes.
So what happens next?
Well, we will have gained enough information by the end of 2014 that we thoroughly understand what makes sense as far as these treatments. We'll have learned some lessons. We continue to learn lessons as we do different treatments, with the idea that in 2015 we'll have an approach that uses these different treatments at different times and at different locations to maximize the value that we get for the dollar that we put into these maintenance programs. We measure it in terms of a return on investment. If you have a portion of payment that's worth, say, $1, and it's degraded in its life, so now it's only worth about 75 cents. And for us to get that segment of street up to a better condition, let's say new, to get it back to $1, we're going to have to spend some money to do some sort of a treatment. If it's 5 cents to get it back to 25 cents added to it, and now it's worth the full $1, we can measure that if we get for 5 cents, we get 25 cents worth of asset value, and express that in terms of a return on investment. Like Aaron was saying earlier, the approach we're taking now, not just with the pavement preservation techniques, but also the way that we value or measure the improvement, what success we're having with this program, is now in terms, in accounting terms, what is the investment we're putting into this asset and what is the asset value that we're getting in return.
It's good to know, but for the meantime, what should people expect?
Well, we are doing our work differently. The types of treatments that we're using, how it looks as they're doing the work, is going to look different than what people have seen over the last several years. What we'd ask people to understand is this is the work of some of these seal coats. It's not going to look like a mill and overlay. It'll look maybe perhaps a different texture, different color. Certainly as they're doing the work, it's going to look different. The example that Aaron gave was a cape seal on a particular stretch of road where we first go in and lay down a material and then put chips of rock on it and let it set for a week. It looks like we've turned a perfectly good paved street into a gravel road. That's a temporary condition, and then we would come in as we did with a final seal, and it actually ends up with a very nice looking road. So people are going to see the roads are going to look a little bit different after we get done, and the process that while we're doing the work is going to look different. Well, we just like everyone to know that the reason we're doing this is because we're trying to get the most value out of their tax dollars, and what we're trying to do too is to get the maximum benefit for this entire street network.
And no need to worry, you're not changing the city over to gravel roads.
No, we're not. Although it may look for some of these treatments, it may look for a week, it may look like that. But anytime anyone has a question or a concern, Aaron's given his name and number, and we welcome any kind of calls or questions and the opportunity to get the information out.
Absolutely. That's the point of the pilot. We want to have feedback. We want to know if this can work.
Well, you guys, thanks so much for being here. I know that this is a subject that affects pretty much everybody who's on the streets, and that's most of the people in the city, so thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching this edition of Local Loop.